So we're here to talk through the guest contribution of an Outside Nurikabe. This is from Tapio Saarinen. I hope I have that right. He also goes by RDJ and posts on perplexable.com sometimes. He has submitted a fair number of unique variations that are often, quite hard, but sometimes are a one-off that have some interesting logic, and this was a case where there's definitely some interesting logic that works well with the Nurikabe style. And if you read carefully of the rules, you'll recognize that since each number is a unique kind of island, there's certainly some obvious ocean cells where the numbers immediately intersect. But looking a little deeper around these corners, imagine, for instance, this is a 3. This column's effectively blocked until the first place you can place a 1 cell, which means this island has to extend up. But because this row is blocked until the first place you can place a 4 cell, you can't use cells in these corners very easily because they just don't have an actual opportunity to exist and grow. And so now we know 3 isn't in these cells. It's also not in this one that's shared, and so it's somewhere else in this row. Let's consider this cell. If that were a 4, it's a distinct 4 from this one, so there's a border on this edge, and so it has to come to the left, and there's a border on that edge still because they can't coincide, and again it gets blocked off. And so you get to a state early in this puzzle, let's shade a little darker, where we know we have an island cell there. It can't go to the left, so it has to come to the top. That means this is where the 4 number is actually going to sit. And shading around it, again, because these two columns are blocked until the first time you can place a number clue, you can get this island pretty quickly. And now with the 7s conflicting with those numbers. This is, the break in that will be the first one most solvers will get. And somewhere up here are 1 and 4. We don't know exactly where yet. It's worth marking those down. This kind of thinking we learned down here in this corner certainly is set up to work in this corner as well. That again, this 8 row and the 7 column are going to block options for that 5, for example. So can a 5 sit here? Again, it can't come to the right, it can't get below this row, so it's got just 2 cells it can take, so that can't be a 5 cell. And the one next to it can't be part because it would be conflicting the 5 with the 7 clue. And so you get to one of the first of a set of decision points in this puzzle, and it's not that you so much need to do deep trial and error, but you do have to think about the consequences of certain placements. So let's imagine this were an island cell, and this were not part of this 1 did not sit exactly there. That means this has to become part of either an 8 or 7 and is going to be the number clue for that island. So for instance, this comes down, the 8 sits here, and it's blocked to the right by a column. It needs a 7 before it can have any cell from a different group, and to the left it's blocked by this 1, which needs to be a 1 before it can be any cell of this group. So this 8 has to come straight vertically, can get 4 cells, but by the 5th cell now it can't actually exist because this 3 doesn't exist anywhere yet in that row. And so it's certainly not the case that there's an island that connects between these 2 cells. And if we look to the right, let's imagine this for part of the 7. The 7 is blocked to the top by the 5 and to the left, or sorry, to the bottom by the 8, and so a 7 island would have to continue to extend to the right. And if it did do this, it could get all the way to here, the 1 could come down to the bottom, but this 5 has to now sit in this space, one of these cells, and grow and not cause problems by size with this 4. And that's just, there are 8 total cells, and you need 9 island cells in this space. It's just not possible. And so it's a little, it's not immediate logic to know that this is not used, but it's one that because of how these rows and columns work together in a very constricting way, that you can get to understanding that this is an ocean cell, and that defines where the 1 and 7 sit. And we can do a little bit more because we know, actually we don't immediately know that's shaded. We can do a little more because we know the 7 has to extend out and it can't be part of this group, and we can shade above because the 5 has to be the first island cell here. And so the first real test you should do is thinking about this 8 now. And again, it's the case, it really looks like it wants to sit here, and if you use intuition in this puzzle, you'll actually solve it much faster. But let's convince ourselves by logic that the 8 has to sit here and not elsewhere in the row. If the 8 is further to the right, that means the 7 can't come down. into this row until the 8 appears, which means it actually has to come straight across. And again, the 5 at the top has to exist. So the 7 has to, again, come straight across in this scenario, and that leaves no space for the 5. So the 8 has to be exactly there, and we can make some of these cells. And now that we've pinned this ocean at the top, it has to have a place to come out, and so we're actually now getting to a place where we don't have a lot of space, but a 5 has to exist somewhere in that row. And so the next decision point that's really useful is thinking about this cell. And the specific reasons to think about is that if it's occupied by the 7, it forces a lot of motion in the adjacent island, that this becomes an ocean cell. This 8 comes down, it has to now come across. You get this sort of scenario where the 8 continues across and it conflicts with this 7 clue. That there's just not a lot of space in this room for an 8 island to fit, dealing with the fact that it has 2 of these outside clues that are going to be constraining this space until they're actually placed. And so I hope this sketch on paper convinces you that this also is an ocean cell. And getting that, I think we're now at a place where most of the deductions will be a little easier, that this being ocean pushes this island one further, sort of a normal Nurikabe kind of step, pushes this ocean one further, and now we don't have much space for this 5 at all. And what we can start to do is work with these 2 clues, which have to be placed from below, this top clue which has to be placed somewhere from the top, and think about scenarios where, for instance, can this 7 come over another cell? Well, really it can. It's going to start limiting just the total amount of room here. Or can this 1 come up to this cell here, for instance? Let's say a 1 were here and we put that in. There's no room for the 5 there, there's no room for the 5 there, so the 1 can't be in the second row. If you even considered putting the 1 in the 3rd row, you should be able to quickly see that again we have a limited set of cells for the 5, but whatever we do, we only leave at most 3 cells for the 4. And so again, intuition would quickly say the 1, for space reasons, needs to be packed to the closest row it can get to from this starting point. But logic will get you there eventually too, or a little trial and error. And it can be fun in some puzzles if it's actually interesting in how the scenarios play out, and that's the case I'd assign here. With the 1 and 4 placed, the 5 still needs to get into this space. The 5 will never reach either of these cells because of the 7, so we can almost put a wall here. And think about any way we can pack 5 island cells and 4 ocean cells, 4 island cells and the remaining ones as ocean cells between these groups. And there's only one way you can get to that, and it's this efficient state where the 4 packs along this edge and you get a p pentomino. And so if you can work through that, you'll quickly get these groups coming down. We're now in a state where the 8 can't sort of use just what's in the 4th or 5th row without getting to the 6th row, which means the 3 needs to sit somewhere early on the left here so that some 8 cells can sit about here. And if you think about what that means, the 8 can't come straight down, it has to come to the right first and then come down, so we can actually get the shape of the islands rather quickly. The 3, again, for efficiency, and this is where intuition will get you through to the answer much faster. Everything is packing to the edges where it can be packed to the edges. Like, this is as close as it could have been, this is as close as it can be. That you'll get this type of progress. This 7 clue needs to take one of these cells, but we haven't placed that number yet. And so marking off that number, we'll get this placed. This 8 has 7 cells used, so it's going to take one of these 2. We actually need to get an island cell at least here. Every island but this 3 has been placed into the grid, so the 3 is going to be what this comes from. It's going to at least use these 2 cells. That gets us to this state. The 3 can't reach all the way over to this spot, so the 7 is going to take that top cell to prevent a 2x2 ocean group here. Shading over, we get this, and we finish this rather interesting but also rather challenging variation on Nurikabe. Thanks for your time.